All right, good evening everybody. We're going to get started now, just to stay on time here. All right, so my name is Afshin Rohani. I'm an engineer and unit manager with the Valley Water, or Santa Clara Valley Water District. And first order of business tonight, I'd like to introduce our director that represents this area on our board of directors, Dr. Barbara Keegan. So Dr. Keegan was born in Canada to Irish immigrant parents. At the age of 12, her family moved to California, and they subsequently became American citizens. And she first moved to San Jose in 1975 and has lived in District 2 for most of her life. She's a third-generation civil engineer, and she worked for a good 19 years for the city of San Jose, rising to the level of a division manager there, and then worked with the water district as well. In addition to serving on the water district board, Dr. Keegan also serves on the boards of the North Willow Glen Neighborhood Association and the San Jose Arena Authority. So please welcome Dr. Keegan.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out tonight. We really do appreciate it. I think you know that we have water and coffee and some cookies and pizza, so nobody has to go hungry here. Don't feel shy. And again, thank you very much for coming to this event tonight. As you know, we're here tonight to provide an update on the Coyote Creek project and looking at opportunities to reduce flood risk to the thousands of homes, businesses, and public facilities within the city of San Jose, while also maintaining and enhancing recreation, water supply, and creek habitat benefits. We do have some people in the audience that I would like to recognize. We have former board member Ferraro, who's sitting back there in the room. Thank you, Pat, for coming here tonight. We also have my colleague, Director Richard Santos. Thank you, Director Santos, for being here. And we also have Eve Zudi, who used to work for me at the city of San Jose, and now he's a division manager. He's probably going to be city manager someday, I'm sure. Anyway, thank you, Eve, for coming here tonight. We appreciate that. I would like to welcome our neighbors that are watching us on Facebook Live. It's still not too late to join us here actually at the Roosevelt Community Center. As I mentioned, we do have food, 901 East Santa Clara Street, San Jose, but if you can't make it, we hope you're watching us on Facebook Live. Those who are watching us remotely, you can submit your questions on Facebook Live, and we will answer those during the question and answer period later in the evening, in addition to the questions that we get from those of you who are able to come here and share your thoughts with us tonight. You can view the presentation from the project webpage at valleywater.org under the Project Updates tab. And we are, as I said, we're here to update you on the Coyote Creek project, but it's really important when you're working on a project like this that essentially that we're going through people's neighborhoods, we're impacting their properties, their neighborhoods, their parks. We really need to hear from the community what your thoughts are, because sometimes the best engineering solution isn't the best community solution, and nobody is more of an expert on a neighborhood than the people who live in that neighborhood. And so we really depend on hearing from folks like you that have come here tonight or that are looking and watching this remotely. We need to hear from you to make sure that what we come up with is something that is going to be acceptable to the public. So getting your input is just one way that we collaborate with you to make this project happen. We also need the help of others. My board colleagues and I continue to vigorously advocate with our state and federal representatives to secure funding for these important flood protection projects. And I think many of you are represented, as I am, by Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, and she's been a true friend to the district and the neighborhood in terms of trying to secure funding and helping us to break through some of the regulatory hurdles that we deal with in terms of getting permits for our project. The investments that we get from the federal and state government are really critical to our ability to deliver these kinds of improvements to the community. And tonight we're also going to be sharing some new information on the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit project. As I'm sure all of you know, Valley Water is engaged in a major project to provide a seismic retrofit and strengthen Anderson Dam so it can safely withstand a strong earthquake, and also that we can fill it to the appropriate level instead of having to keep it at reduced levels. So right now we're working on the Environmental Impact Report, or the EIR, for the Anderson Dam project, and we're working to get permits so that we can break ground, we're all hoping, in 2022. So for the Anderson Dam project, our board approved 4 key goals for the project to focus on. And these goals are based on what we've heard from the public, what we've heard from the regulators, and from good engineering principles. So the first one is public safety. Public safety has to come first. Then water supply. Environmental enhancements. You know, there's an opportunity with this project to do things that can make things better for the environment, including for our aquatic creatures, fish, and so forth. But we also need to look at financial sustainability, because people have to pay for water, and we want to try and make the project be cost effective so that it doesn't result in, you know, making your water bill go up astronomically. So, in addition to talking about Coyote Creek improvements, staff's going to be here to answer any questions that you might have about Anderson as well, because essentially how Anderson performs does have an impact on what happens with Coyote Creek. So as I mentioned earlier, tonight we want to hear your input and, you know, what questions you have and what suggestions you might have about the Coyote Creek alternatives. And we'll take that input, and a lot of this is based on our previous meeting where we listened to input from the community, and we're going to further refine the alternatives into what can become a flood protection project. So thank you again so much for your support, your patience, and collaboration on this project. And now I'm going to turn it back to the project team so they can get into the specifics. Afshin, back to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so to provide us the agenda, I'm going to introduce our facilitator for tonight, Christine Butterfield.
Hi, my name is Christine Butterfield. I'm with Management Partners, and my role tonight is to keep this meeting on track and ensure that your interests and your input are heard as part of this process. As you heard Director Keegan mentioned, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an update on the flood risk reduction alternatives, and those are along the wall here, and they do incorporate the input from previous community meetings. In addition, I know that staff has conducted also individual meetings with property owners as well to inform this process. So if you would pull out your agendas just briefly and take a peek. As Director Keegan mentioned, there'll be a brief presentation by staff, the project manager. Then we'll move on to small group discussions. And what we would like to do, and Dam Retrofit is going to make the announcement, is organize you by areas. And there's staff peppered throughout the room tonight that'll serve as your facilitators. And then after you have your small group discussions, we're going to hear from everyone related to what are their preferences on these updated alternatives, and any additional questions, comments, or concerns that you have. And then we'll wrap it up with a discussion of the next steps. A couple of housekeeping items. The restrooms are through the door here to the left, and there are interpreters in the back of the room. They're standing. If there are any individuals that would like some additional assistance, we also have listening devices up front. And all of you, I hope, received comment cards. Please complete those. The Valley Water is committed to process improvement, and the input that you provide improves future meetings, and also for those of you that return comment cards, I know that the Valley Water would like to thank you with a gift. Also, as Director Keegan mentioned, the meeting is being streamed on Facebook, and the PowerPoint's available at the district website. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Damaris to present the new alternatives and the modifications.
Hello, good evening. Just one thing, would the translator want to make their announcement in their specific languages in case there is somebody that didn't understand the English instruction? Thank you.
Tôi tên là Tiffany, tôi là người thông dịch tiếng Việt. Nếu như mà các anh chị em nào cần thông dịch, cần nghe bằng tiếng Việt thì xin làm ơn tới cái bàn ở trên phía trên để mà lấy cái máy nghe. Cảm ơn rất là nhiều.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Eva, soy la intérprete de español. Si alguien necesita intérprete, por favor vayan a la recepción. Les van a dar todo el equipo. Los vamos a ayudar. Gracias.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna get going because I have a lot of stuff to cover in only about 15-20 minutes. So my name is Damaris Villalobos, for those of you who do not know me. Some of you met me last time. I'm the project manager for the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. And last time, on June 3rd, we had our first meeting where I first introduced the project. I talked about the project limits and the setting, history, project timeline. We talked about very early conceptual alternatives, and then we obtained input from you guys. What are we gonna do today? So today we're gonna go over some of the input that you guys gave us. Then I'm gonna go over the criteria for the feasible alternatives. So many of you had questions and comments about when I say conceptual feasible alternatives, what does that mean? And it was my oversight. We're always using those words, but I didn't necessarily explain what that meant and how do we go from conceptual to feasible. So I'll talk about that before delving into the feasible alternatives. Then we're gonna talk about emergency preparedness because we're early in the winter season. I know right now it's very dry, but with the weather the way it is, we don't know if we're gonna have another atmospheric river like we had in 2017, and many of you live in the floodplain, so I'm gonna mention what we are doing to notify you of any emergency that might happen, and then what you can do to prepare yourself. And then Afshin is going to talk about Anderson Dam, as Director Keegan mentioned, and then we're going to move on to table discussions. So just to be sure, the project scope is very long. It's about 9 miles long from Montague Expressway to Tully Road. This time, because the project scope is long, we're only going to concentrate on the area between Maybury Road and Highway 280. That's what we call reaches 6 and 7. Most of the input that I'm going to give in here is for those specific areas. So just a brief summary of some of the public input we got last time. From this specific area, Maybury to Highway 280, we got 87 comments. And most of the comments fall in one of 5 categories. You guys had comments about Anderson Dam, flooding dynamics and problem definition, about interagency coordination and collaboration, and project goals. Many comments about the conceptual alternatives, and then other comments that I'll go over later. Just a refresher from what we talked about last time. So last time I had 2 maps on your tables. One of them showed an area that looks at the inundation area for 2017. We asked you to make comments on these. We also showed another map that had very early conceptual alternatives. Very rough. We didn't have heights, we didn't have lengths. They were very, very undefined. So what we do is we take your input and we refine them. Just quickly going over some of the very pervasive comments that we had last time. I'm just going to read some of them. What is Valley Water doing to ensure the joint collaboration of Valley Water and City of San Jose staff and let residents know government is working for you? Flood risk reduction is important, but we do not want a big impact on our neighborhood with the proposed alternatives. Getting property owners to legally maintain their own property. If this is not possible, get Valley Water and City of San Jose to step in. On 17th Street and San Antonio Street, absolutely no public access since we would like to deter the homeless from living there. Instead of permanent flood walls, what about temporary flood walls? Most of the people in the affected areas do not want berms, walls, or flood proofing. Oh, what happened? Unclear in some areas how concepts would help protect anything, especially houses that did not flood on William Street. Support berms since they are a better option than walls, but some residents are concerned about losing park space. Rather than raising homes, buy homes to recreate the floodplain north of Selma Ollinder and William Street parks. And finally, we understand that many communities are now raising homes above the 100-year flood level. There is probably no point in stopping at the 20-year flood level once such project begins. So these are some of the most pervasive comments. It's just a sample of them. We got about 84. So after revising the comments that we have from all 3 meetings, we realized that even though we were collaborating and coordinating with City of San Jose, we needed to significantly increase our collaboration and coordination efforts. So after those meetings, we increased the number of meetings that we had with them because many of the alternatives that we were proposing were on their lands. So we needed to coordinate very closely with them. So we've been having monthly meetings with City of San Jose and lately weekly meetings with them. The main projects that we are coordinating with is the Berryessa Bar Urban Village Project, Coyote Creek Trail Master Plan, and BART. That's mainly with Valley Transportation Authority. Many of you had questions about the impacts of BART on Coyote Creek. There are some areas where BART is proposed to cross Coyote Creek, so we're collaborating, working closely with them to make sure that there are no negative impacts on Coyote Creek. As I mentioned earlier, one of the questions and comments that I had was about feasibility factors. What does that mean when I say feasible alternatives? So in going from conceptual into feasible alternatives, what are we looking for? So conceptual alternatives, as I mentioned before, these are broad, simple, high-level options of flood mitigation strategies proposed in a certain area. Similar to the map that I showed during the first meeting, very rough lines, we don't have any elevations, we're just saying maybe a flood wall will work here, maybe a berm, and then we give this to you and you say, no, I don't think this is going to work. Feasible alternatives, on the other hand, are available and reasonable options which are screened during the conceptual alternatives stage against a set criteria. What is that criteria? The criteria comes from the goals of the project. The main goal, if you recall from the last meeting, is to protect homes, schools, businesses, and transportation networks from a flood event similar to 317. That's the main goal, and that goes to the criteria. So everything that we're proposing that meets that criteria passes to the next criteria, which is we want to find a project that is the least environmentally damaging. This is closely connected to the third, permittable within the next 2 years. Shane is going to talk about why this project is on an expedited schedule, why we need to build it within the next 2 years. We need to be ready to start construction. So the least environmentally damaging and permittable within the next 2 years. It has to be technically feasible and logistically feasible. Technically feasible has to do with the technology that we're proposing, or the construction methodology, or the materials. They have to be things that are already here, not things that are, need to be invented. So things that we can buy, we can get, they can get shipped to us. That's technically feasible. Logistically feasible has to do with if we find an area that has hazardous waste where we cannot dig, or maybe cultural resources where they found some historical, anthropological stuff where we cannot dig in there. Those things delay projects. And right now we're getting started to start a cultural resources study to make sure that those areas that we are disturbing, we don't find anything that is going to delay us in the future. Also, it has to do, logistically feasible has to do with acquiring property. If it's something unreasonable, it's not logistically feasible. The next criteria is financially feasible, both short-term and long-term, and then finally that has community support. So to answer that question that you had, these are the criteria that we're looking at. This is the criteria that we're looking at in order for us to move forward to the next stage. Now, another comment that we got is houses on 16th Street did not flood, and this is where the team is proposing the berm. And I'll talk more about this in the future slides. But basically, in order for me to answer this question, I want to define what critical facilities means. Critical facility is a facility for which an event, where even a slight chance of flooding is poses to threat of a threat. So on top of protecting homes, schools, businesses, and roads, we also are looking at protecting some of those critical facilities like police stations, fire stations, vehicle and equipment storage facilities, and emergency operations centers, hospitals, nursing homes, and housing likely to have occupants who may not be sufficiently mobile. Streets and roads considered critical for fire prevention, evacuation, and rescue operations, and public and private utility facilities. So I want to point out the streets and roads. Whenever we can, we are trying with this project to prevent the streets to get flooded. Because when first responders, let's say there's a flood event, somebody does get stuck in their house and they need to respond, we're trying for them to have access and not to put them at risk. So that's part of what this flood protection project is doing as well. So I understand some of the streets, if you say the street is getting flooded, no residences are getting flooded. We're trying to maintain the water, the Coyote Creek waters off the street so that we can allow first responders to attend to any emergency that might happen. Now, really quickly, before I delve into the main presentation, you guys had questions last time about upstream detention possibilities in Coyote Valley. You said reduce the time to look at this and do it quickly. So this is Coyote Valley, as you're more familiar with me because you live close. I live in Hayward. But so you see this is a big area. There is no houses, mostly agricultural areas. And then you're asking, what if we just make the Coyote Creek waters to just flood this area? What would happen downstream? So what we did together with the project team is we started doing estimates on what are the challenges, how can we move water to that area, how big would the area be, what impact it's going to have downstream. We looked at 3 constraints that we had: terrain constraints, shallow groundwater table, and private property constraint. The first constraint has to do with if we want to move water from Coyote Creek to this area in here, we want to be able to do it by gravity. We don't want to have to use pumps or man-made structures that might fail in an emergency. So then we need to find an area that is lower than Coyote Creek. That's the first thing. So then let's dig a hole, right? However, in this area, as many of you know, we have a groundwater basin, and according to our groundwater experts at Valley Water, the groundwater table is very shallow in this area. It's approximately 1 foot below the ground surface elevation. So we couldn't actually dig that much because during a flood event, the water table goes up and down. So we cannot make a huge hole in there. So the area that we were able to feasible get is about 500 acre-feet of area within Coyote Valley. We estimated an attenuation of about 800 CFS. As you might recall, we're trying to provide flood protection for flows of 7,000 to about 8,500. So what this gives us downstream is an estimated reduction in the design water surface elevation of approximately 1 foot. So any option that I'm going to give you in the next couple of slides, just think about, okay, if she's proposing an 8-feet wall, just reduce 1 foot. So what we're assessing right now is, can we increase these? Is it worth doing? Can we do it in 2 years? Can we get the permits? So this is something that we looked at. You guys asked us to look at. Just wanted to provide you with an update on where we are. So now delving into the meat of the presentation. As I mentioned, we have 2 areas that we're going to concentrate on today, Ridge 6 and Ridge 7. Ridge 6 goes from Maybury Road all the way to Santa Clara Street. The main area that floods within Ridge 6 is the Watson Park area, showed in here. This is part of the map that I showed last time. Conceptual alternatives that we showed last time, they were very rough. We said, okay, let's put something in here, berm or a flood wall so the water doesn't get out. Because the main area that gets flooded is this residential area in here. So we got input from you, and then we got to this feasible alternative. Basically what we're trying to do is protect you from flooding, doing the minimum amount of disturbance, working together with Parks and Recreation. So what we're proposing is these residents in here already have a wall in here. It's not a flood wall, but what we would need, let's say they don't have anything in here, is about 2-foot flood wall that goes from here, goes west on Jackson Street. Then we're proposing a passive barrier in here, and then a short berm, about 100 foot long, and it starts at 1 foot and goes to about 5 feet to meet this passive barrier in here. That way, water is not gonna go and flood and inundate this area. There are other proposed minimum flood walls in other critical areas like schools and also roads to prevent the freeway from getting flooded. But the main area is this area. I'll show you a video of what a passive barrier is. This is just a cross section of what I was talking about. Passive barrier, approximately 5 feet. The passive barrier, during the rest of the year when it's not flooded, it will be flat. You wouldn't see it. And then when the water comes in, then it'll do automatically that. And I'll show you a video in a minute. Hopefully it'll work. It takes about 40 seconds. So the way they work quickly is the rising floodwaters create hydrostatic pressure to lift the barrier, no manpower required. So now moving on to Ridge 7, we actually divided Ridge 7 into 3 different segments. The first segment goes from Santa Clara Street to San Antonio Street. And within this segment, we identified 2 areas. The first area is actually comprises of 3 homes. I have the addresses here. These homes are placed very low in the floodway, and during 2017, the water got to about, the high water mark was between 10 feet and 12 feet, depending on the terrain. So what we said is a flood wall, it would be too tall. It would be about 13 feet. And many of you said we don't like flood walls, they're hideous. You guys also mentioned that many of you bought these properties because you wanted to see the creek, so a flood wall would not be feasible. A passive barrier, as you saw, once it's raised, let's say it's a 12-foot passive barrier, the footprint, when it's horizontal, it'll be that length plus about 1 foot more. So it'll take a lot of room in the backyard, and it has to be free of anything on top. So then that's another thing that we decided is not feasible. So for these 3 homes, the most feasible option would be to elevate those homes so that we can take them out of we can actually prevent them from flooding. And if we raise them, as many of you mentioned, we might as well raising them to the base flood elevation, which is the 100-year flood level. The other option would be voluntary acquisition. So if you are thinking about selling those homes, let us know. We're interested in getting them so that we can take them out of the floodplain. The next area within that segment is most of the homes, all of the homes on Arroyo Way, and the 2 homes at the end of South 17th Street, 82 South 17th Street and 96 South 17th Street. Those homes, we have different options that we can have in there. We can have the passive barrier, elevate them. I know some of this option is not feasible for some of your homes because some of them might be historical. And then there is also voluntary acquisition if you guys decide to sell. Now, moving on to the second segment, San Antonio Street to William Street. We have some homes on Brookwood Avenue. I know 321 specifically did get flooded during 2017. Similarly to the other option that I just talked about, we have passive barriers, elevate the home, or voluntary acquisition. So we have 3 options for those. And then for the homes on South 16th Street and William Street, those homes already have a wooden fence in the back of the home. So what we're proposing is to replace this fence, this wooden fence, with a flood wall. It'll be similarly in height, same height. This one is about 8 foot tall. So it'll be similarly, but now it's going to be a flood wall, a structurally sound flood wall. That's one option. If we do decide to go with that though, all of us have to work as a team because as you can imagine, we cannot only have one house with a flood wall, it has to be all of them. Otherwise, if one person decides not to do that, then the whole area is going to get flooded. If we cannot do that, elevating is an option, or voluntary acquisition. Now there are 2 homes in that area, 398 South 17th Street and 797 East William Street, which are similar to the South 17th Street homes, which are very low on the floodway. They elevated, they got flooded. The actual high water mark is about 10 feet to 12 feet. So those homes, if we put a flood wall, will be very tall, about 13 feet tall. So we're proposing to elevate them or do the voluntary acquisition. These are just 2 homes. Now, moving on to the last segment, the William Street Park and Selma Ollinder Park area. I'm going to start with Selma Ollinder Park. Selma Ollinder on this side is very straight, it's actually very easy for us to install a passive barrier. According to the vendor, it's a straight shot, so we can do that. It'll be a passive barrier that is flat most of the year, and then it goes up to about 5 feet tall during a flood event. For William Street, we're proposing 2 things. I think you saw this last time. We have, what we need is to add some elevation so that we can prevent water from going into the street and flooding the houses on William Street and South 16th Street. So we're proposing it to do it either with some way of having some elevation so that we keep the water inside the park. It can be this. It can look like this as well. Like this as well. So when we say berm, it can be any type of facility that is just going to increase the elevation to keep the water inside. Another option would be also a passive barrier. The reason why we're not only going with the passive barrier is because when we went out there with the vendor, he mentioned that every time a passive barrier does a little turn, you need to have what is called a wiper wall. So a wiper wall would be, instead of having it's a wall so that the actual passive barrier can do that. So every time you have a turn, you have that type of barrier. Now the last thing that I wanted to mention is that one of the things that we did after 2017 is City of San Jose together with Valley Water And we actually approved a joint emergency action plan for severe storm and flood response. This is available online to the public. It outlines how the city and Valley Water manage, prepare for, and communicate about flooding issues on Coyote Creek, as well as other waterways, establishes roles and responsibilities, who does what, and as I mentioned, this is publicly available. Here's a link in our website. You can find the presentation and look at the link. I'm not going to go over these so that we can move a little bit faster. You can also find some resources in terms of flood protection for an emergency event in this link in here, valleywater.org, flood ready. And the next step is for us, after we get input from you on the preferred alternative, we're going to move on and complete the planning study report. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Avshi so he can talk about Anderson.
Thank you, Damaris. Oh, do you have the clicker too? Okay. Let's see. Okay, so as Dr. Keegan mentioned, we want to give you an update on the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project tonight. That had been, many of you had questions about that project in the last meeting, so we think that's probably a good idea. As you may know, this is what the dam looks like right now. It's about a 200-foot high dam, far upstream in Morgan Hill, basically Cochrane Road, and it captures about 90,000 acre-feet of water. It's the largest reservoir that we have. In fact, all of our other reservoirs would fit inside this one. So our studies have shown that this dam is susceptible to failure from a very, very large seismic event in two ways. Basically, if the faults nearby were to move significantly, then it would be susceptible to a seismic rupture kind of failure. And if and the material inside the dam is not, we know a lot more now since 1950 when the dam was built. And there was a concern that if there's strong ground shaking, some of the material inside the dam might liquefy, and that means that the dam crest slumps down. And if the dam is full when that happens, then obviously water would wash over the top and erode it, and then we would get kind of a catastrophic failure situation. And there's a large area downstream, including all of this area, that would be subject to flooding. So we want to prevent that. The dam is being operated under restricted elevation right now, and actually our board is going to look at that again and make a decision for operation for this winter. Very soon. It's going to be at the next board meeting, I think, coming up in 2 weeks. So this is the existing condition, and then as the project moves along, what we're going to do is remove all the unsuitable material, rebuild the dam with suitable material as we know right now. Replace the spillway, even though the spillway looked like it was operating fine, and originally we didn't think we would necessarily have to do it. After Orville, the Division of Safety of Dams is much more particular about the quality of spillways, and we agreed that we should replace it. The low-level outlet pipe, so as you may know, currently the outlet that we have from this dam is pretty small. This new one is going to be much larger and will allow us to release flows much more easily. The temporary diversion system is actually going to be the first thing that's built. This is going to take about 2 years to build, tunneling through the rock. And this is the way that it's going to lower the water that's behind the dam for the dam protection. And then during construction, this is how water gets around the facility as it's being built. And then finally, there's going to be a high-level outlet. So this is a feature that's required in all dams now, where you need to be able to drop the water surface behind the dam to a safe level in a very short period of time. So with this in place, we could reduce the elevation behind the dam in a week to a safe level. Schedule-wise, current schedule is to begin construction in October of 2022. It's going to take something between 7 or 8 years to build. This is critical, and one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this tonight was sort of the intimate way these two projects are linked. as I was mentioned, as you probably know, this dam is not going to be rebuilt in one step. Basically, we're not going to be able to go down to the ground and back up, in 1 year. It's going to take several years to do that. As the dam is being replaced and as it's for the critical years where it's at less than full height, we're going to have to be able to pass water around it so it doesn't get overtopped. For that situation, this project that we're talking about tonight needs to be in place to make sure that the downstream channels can handle that flow, those flows without flooding. So that's one of the reasons why this is a very expedited project, because we would have to do this anyway for dam. Even if we weren't doing this, which we would be for the safety of the community downstream, we would need to do it as part of our dam construction anyway. So these two projects are really well connected, and it's necessary to have it in place as the dam is getting rebuilt. Okay, so moving along, I'll hand it back to Christine.
Great, great. So now we're going to actually move into the portion of the meeting where the district hears from you. I'm going to ask Damaris to come up and provide instructions about how the small group discussions are going to be organized. But I did want to just reiterate that, as Director Keegan mentioned, as well as the project team, that the success of these types of complex projects are highly dependent on the collaboration of property owners, multiple government agencies. And I did want to acknowledge that we have a representative from Congresswoman Zoe Loughran's office, Carrie Duncan. Thank you very much. Just acknowledge she's here and she's listening. And of course, the federal government plays a key role based upon the role of the Army Corps of Engineers in a project like these. So with that, Damaris, did you want to provide some instructions? Because I know you wanted to gather input based upon where folks are most interested.
Yeah, thank you. So what we wanted to do, if it's, sorry.
On the agenda, it says now there's a question and answer period about these presentations first before we break up. I want to make sure you.
Yeah, we can do that just briefly because we need to move on. But if you have more questions, we're going to be here and we can answer all of the questions. But if you want to answer your question.
Yeah, I'm Ted Smith. I've lived in this neighborhood for 45 years, both sides of the creek. Louder, easy. I've lived in the neighborhood for 45 years on both sides of the creek. My family was flooded. My son, wife, and daughter. And I have been raising questions about the dam itself and what's going to happen. As the dam is taken down, it's going to make the danger here even more, which is what I'm thinking of. I wanted to ask, you said a temporary diversion process at the dam. Can you put that slide back up there again? Because that's really important. If you can stop the water from coming over that dam, then a lot of this stuff we're worried about now in terms of the barriers won't be as necessary. So that, what do you call it, the temporary diversion system. And we've known for over 40 years that spillway was not sufficient, and the district's been ordered by the state since the 1980s to fix it and hasn't done it. I've got a paper I've circulated around talking about that. So this is a really, really important issue. So can you explain, if you can do the temporary diversion system while you're rebuilding that dam, will that in fact take care of a probable maximum flood scenario? And if not, why not? And why not then redo the spillway while you're doing the dam so they could take care of the probable maximum flood?
Can everybody hear me? No. Not loud enough. Okay. So, my name is Chris Higgs. I'm the Deputy Operating Officer for our Dam Safety Division. So basically I'm in charge of the reconstruction of the Anderson Dam. The temporary diversion structure is actually how we will dewater the reservoir. It is not how we will pass flows through. The spillway is actually going to get constructed during the first 2 years of operation for the dam. So out of the 7 to 8 years that the dam will take to get constructed, in the first 1 or 2 years the spillway will be constructed. That will be the new, actually the high level outlet will get constructed as a temporary spillway during construction to allow the passing of the probable maximum flood. I did have a chance to read your handout, and the flows that went over the spillway in 2017 are actually not a probable maximum flood level event. The PMF is actually to the order of 96,000 acre feet. What we had going over the spillway was around 7,000. That was a designed release for the operation of the dam. The spillway is actually designed to channel flows that would otherwise overtop the facility. When you look at Oroville and the failure mechanism there, what they had was so much flow that it eroded the spillway, and the new requirements by the Department of Safety Dams, DSOD, is for the anchorage and actually the width and height of the spillway to be revised, which is what we'll be doing. Because of the interim operating conditions where you have a lower dam crest, everything will have to go through the high-level outlet pipe. That's a large pipe along with a low-level outlet. The low-level outlet pipe is in a tunnel that is 14 feet in diameter. The high-level pipe is smaller than that, but between the two, they will be capable of passing a PMF through there.
And when is it, if everything goes according to plan and no delays, when will those be up?
So the high-level and low-level outlet will be for the first 2 years of construction. The spillway will be towards the latter half, depending, because we do have to reconstruct the embankment prior to getting into the spillway because of the way the foundation is. But the high-level and low-level outlet should be capable of passing the PMF.
And that would be, all things go well.
Correct.
In 2028, something like that.
No, that would, so if the project starts in October of 2022, you're looking in 2024 to be able to pass those flows through. 2024, late, early into 2025, which is why it's important to get the Coyote Creek project done prior to that, because the project will have the ability to pass larger flows through, and if that's the case, then the downstream area needs to have the ability to take those flows.
We have a question back here.
I'm capable of holding it, thank you. Sorry, I'm sorry I'm not in a good mood being here with the water district. It's kind of distressing for me. And I wanted to ask the question, how can you expect us to believe that your primary goal is protecting homes? You have known, the water district has known for like 30, 40 years that the dam is inadequate and the spillway is inadequate. And we all know that the lack of an adequate spillway to get rid of water suddenly is what caused the flood. And furthermore, we didn't get any warning. I'm a 74-year-old woman. A fireman came to the door in a boat and said, "Jump in, we're evacuating." And that was my warning. And so for 30, 40 years, you've been sitting on your butts and doing nothing. And then you expect us all of a sudden that we believe that you've totally changed and become responsible, and you're going to do the things that need to do. People in this neighborhood have suffered, and it's because of the lack of adequacy of the dam and the spillway, which the water district has known about for 40 years. And you know, it's insult added to injury. You give us this little package, and it says, "Are you flood ready?" The crucial question is the district flood ready?
We got a question here?
Yeah, my name's Pat Ferraro. I'd like to move the discussion downstream of the dam into the Coyote Valley. The Coyote Valley is, as you know, about 10 miles long and about a mile and 2 miles wide, and it basically is a floodplain in its entirety. It's full of gravel mostly, except in the north end that's got a wetlands, which probably got some sediment and some peat material from the growth in the wetlands. But basically the entire Coyote Valley is a floodplain. And therefore, it's all floodable. So it's about 7,000 acres. If you put a foot of water from a flood and spread that out over the whole Coyote Valley, you've got about 7,000 acre-feet of surcharge storage on top of the valley floor. And then that can be attenuated as it's released into the main channel. So I really disagree with this analysis that was presented here, that it's only about 800 acre-feet of attenuation and takes off about a foot off the water surface. So I think you can do a whole lot more. And if you need to release that water slowly, you can kind of do like the Corps has done for the city of New Orleans and put gates in and release that water in or out of the Coyote Valley in order to attenuate a lot of this downstream flooding that occurred in 2017. Thank you.
So I just want to make sure that we can hear from as many people that are here this evening. So let's take one more question. You can answer one more question and then we'll. Okay, great.
But,
I'm not sure if there's going to be time to respond to the other comments, from the people in charge here. But my question is regarding your, passive barrier. To me, in my ignorance, it seems like you need some sort of activation. Someone needs to go and make that baby a race. Since residents, we didn't get informed that we were flooded, how would someone be informed to go and raise the barrier? How it floats? Thank you. So my next question is, who will be responsible to keep the area clear to let that thing float? So yeah, those are my questions as the information.
I'll answer that question and then you want to answer this question and then we'll move on. So those are really good points. Those are the same questions we have for the vendor. How are these things gonna, go out by themselves? And yeah, if they float, it's with the buoyancy of the water. You don't need any main. So basically, they're designed to work with as the water is flooding them, it'll raise by itself. You do have an optional lift system that we are also getting quotes for that. In case we know that the water is coming, we can also push a button and it'll go up. But they are designed, the main thing is that we don't need any manpower. So that's why we are looking at these specific passive barriers. The other question is they are designed to have, even if you have cars on top, they can still go up. They are, that's what they told us, the vendor, is that they're 100% guaranteed that they're going to go up. They are all over the East Coast and areas in Texas as well. They were in there during the last hurricane in Houston, and they sent us videos of how they work, even when a car was on top of it. We had questions about what if a tree is in there as well, and they are supposed to also take that force and go up still. However, in terms of who's responsible for cleaning them, once a year, all they need is for somebody to flush them so they can actually open up. And that's something that our operations and maintenance are actually, they saw the video and they saw that it's just with pressure cleaning. That's all you have to do. Once a year, you have to do that.
Thank you. In regards to Coyote Valley, one of the big challenges with Coyote Valley for flood protection, as Damaris was talking about, is that Laguna Seca is right there. It's a natural wetland. Groundwater is very high here, so getting water from Coyote across to it in a way that's reliable in the winter, when the groundwater is high, is a problem. In other words, you can only do it to a certain extent. So, I mean, the team has looked at this. The specific area we looked at is obviously the areas that have been are going to be acquired as public lands by the city and various other groups, and it is possible to do a great deal of reduction of the flows coming downstream. It's just so far it's looking like the level of reduction is not enough to eliminate work downstream for the flood that we're looking at. The other way to think about this too that I wanted to mention is that we're approaching this project in a step fashion. Right after the flood, there were these emergency work that we did in Rock Springs, invasive plant controls, as well as the new joint emergency action plan with the city, the new gauges that were installed. And then over the next year, we looked at opportunities for early flood protection, and we built that berm and flood wall in Rock Springs because that didn't increase flows downstream, so it was doable. This, what we're talking about here, is the next step, is sort of the interim to get us to the 2017 level of capacity downstream, so that if something like that were to happen again, it would not flood the people downstream. But the board has instructed us we're not going to stop here. We're going to work with the Corps of Engineers and work for higher levels of flood protection too over time. So it's sort of think of it as what we can do immediately we did, what we can do in a short period of time. That's what this project is. And then we'll continue to work for higher levels of flood protection. I think this lady had a question we should get to before we move on.
My questions will be very short, actually. First of all, you mentioned very specific addresses and very specific streets that you had feasible options, and you did have options. What are those options going to do for the people that are between William and San Antonio that flooded between 18th and what, 23rd? Are those going to do anything to protect those homes, or are you only protecting those 6 homes that you mentioned?
Oh, so everything works together, but numbers.
Which ones are you talking about? William Street?
You mentioned streets on 16th, 17th, on William, on Brookwood. You mentioned east side of Arroyo.
Yeah, I mentioned specific addresses, but all of those, as I mentioned, some of the options have flood walls and passive barriers. Those are complete streets. Basically, everybody has to do that option. I guess we can talk about it specifically the houses that you're referring to.
I'm referring to blocks of houses.
Yeah. We can, I guess we can talk about it afterwards so that we can move on with the discussion. Yeah, and we'll point on a map. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Because most of the houses that I mentioned and the areas that I mentioned are areas that are at the highest risk of flooding and that flooded during 2017. So we're trying to touch all of those areas. Yeah, most of the areas, like all of the areas that are at the highest risk of flooding and that flooded during 2017, with those options, we're trying to contain the water within Coyote Creek so that it doesn't flood the areas that flooded. I think you're talking about the areas that flooded northeast of Selma Olinder Park. It does, okay, yeah, those are, yeah, so these ones, I guess we can point to a map. If we keep the water contained within Selma Olinder Park and William Street Park, we're preventing water from going up east, north and east. We're just containing the water in there. We can talk about it, I guess, so to show you in a map. Yeah. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna discuss the options, the specific options for the specific areas. If we have people that live on South 17th Street or Royal Way, I don't know if you can raise your hand maybe. Yeah, so you guys are already there. So we're gonna discuss mainly that area. We have people that live William Street Park and Selma Olinder Park. If you can raise your hand. Maybe you guys can sit together, and then Judy is gonna work with you guys. Yeah. Judy, can you sit down over there? That it was, yeah, William Street, and let me show you the maps. Okay, so the first is, we already talked about South 17th Street and Arroyo Way. Huh? Yeah. And then San Antonio Street to East William Street, which includes the South 16th Street homes that I'm proposing a flood wall in the back. I think you guys are, yeah. So are you all guys all sitting together? Okay. Can I have one person, Katie? Can you work with them? So this is South 16th Street. And then, what neighborhood are you in? 21st Street? Oh, okay, so those are the houses. We're good. Right? Okay. So this one is San Antonio. So we are here in the San Antonio 20th Street. If you guys can move to this table.
San Antonio 20th Street is right here.
Yeah, 19th Street.
19th
We
Street.
can actually have 2 tables because we have enough people. And then they are where they are South 16th Street.
South 16th Street.
You guys can see. So is there somebody that lives in the Watson Park neighborhood?
Watson Park?
And table
We have the Watson Park in here.
And table facilitators, can you raise your hands, please? Valley Water, okay, great. And these individuals will lead this piece of the discussion, just taking input on strengths, weaknesses, questions. In about 20 minutes, we'll come back together and hear what you have shared. Thank you.
Yeah, saving the forces. Yeah. So. It's going reasonably well.
small group discussions. We're going to come back together in about 3 minutes and get your input, strengths, limitations, and additional questions. Thanks.
flood risk if the dam collapses. And they want to know how much warning are they going to get if something happens with the dam. Thank you.
Great, great. Okay, that's a great list of questions, but we heard move along quickly, aesthetically pleasing, and ensuring that folks are protected and safe. Not aesthetically? No.
More important than protection.
Safety is number one. Yep, safety is number one. Okay. And then there's a list of questions, and I know that the Valley Water is going to be putting together an FAQ. And so the list of questions collected tonight, staff will be working on responses and putting that on the project website. So these questions are important. Okay, next table with the copious notes. Katie.
Hi, our area was East San Antonio Street to East William Street, so main comments that we got, 8 feet doesn't seem high enough, can we build it higher? If you build a wall on one side, do you need to put one on the other side? There are some houses that are upstream of William Street Park that don't seem to be addressed. What are you going to do about that? Would you need to acquire property to build this flood wall? If you raise the houses, it would be very high. Stairs would be an issue. And those were the main.
Anything else, group, to add? Anything missed from the list? Okay, great. Thank you. Should we call this table 3? Through the third table, Gabe?
Gabe, let's see, try to do these. This is Route 7, East William Street to Highway 280. And we had quite a bit of comments. Some of the William Street and South Antonio Street. Route 7, East San Antonio to East William Street. Okay, sorry about that. Some of the main concerns was I think been hearing throughout the meeting was the dam and the potential for a catastrophe from the dam and why didn't we do anything before now, and why did it flood in 2017 in those areas that hadn't flooded before? And this design for the creek is it can become obsolete after the dam construction. Safety regarding the 2-foot flood wall along Skull and to improve the aesthetics. Oh yeah, and a big part of it was water coming out of the storm drains during the 2017 flood event, especially around San Antonio and William Street on South 19th and 20th Street. And what can we do about that? And that's the big issue, the storm drains being under capacity. So would you maintain passive barrier when the creeks aren't maintained? Well, maintenance of the creeks, there's a lot of issues with trash and homeless people and debris, and how we're going to maintain these new designs when we can't maintain the existing creeks now. To make sure that we test regularly the passive barrier and have the public go out and see how it work, and reconsider raising all the homes as part of the project, not just the homes along the creek. Thank you.
I wanted to mention one thing that question that somebody raised. This is loud. So you guys were talking about the areas northeast. Somebody asked a question about those. Why am I not listing them by address? That was a very good question. Sorry I didn't answer it before. So what I'm proposing here, it's because during the 2017 flood event, water, as many of you remember, was going below the bridge, flooding this area, and also water was going east from Coyote Creek. This is Coyote Creek. So what we want to do is, this is a school, Olinder Elementary School, have a flood wall in here, and then that passive barrier in here to contain the water in here, so that it doesn't go north That's one source of flooding. The other source of flooding, as somebody mentioned, is storm drainage, right? The floodgates. Now, we are working with Public Works, City of San Jose, letting them know that there are two, even if I finish this project, right? Let's finish this project in 2 years, in 4 years, it's gonna be done. This area, we have storm drainage that is not properly sized, it's still gonna get flooded. So we need to work together with them. That's why I mentioned that we are working with them, having meetings, letting them know that even once we finish this area is still gonna get flooded if we have shallow flooding. So that's why I didn't list these houses by address, because my intent is to contain all the water in here. That's the reason.
Just one thing that I wanted to add, not everyone may know this, but we don't own and operate the storm drain system. So we do work with the City of San Jose, and part of the problem, as I understand it, is some of the backflow preventers did not work. So normally you have something that, a flap gate kind of thing that would come down and it would keep the water where it should be in the creek. In this case, it went into these undersized storm drain pipes and backed up, and that was part of the problem. That's why we need to work with the City of San Jose to fix both those issues, the undersized pipe and the backflow prevention devices as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, answer that question that you guys had about why am I not listing those houses.
Okay, we have 4 more tables to hear from. So, Jen?
Hi, we were in the Watson Park area, Reach 6. The main concerns were with the flood walls. For the privacy wall, there's a privacy wall, a 6-foot privacy wall there, and if you're proposing a 2-foot flood wall, and then you still need a 6-foot privacy wall.
Yeah.
Vandalism concerns with the passive barrier, people breaking them. Watson Park owners want to add the city, whoever owns Watson Park, they want to add an entryway and a pathway, and if the berm there at the entrance would create a problem with that entrance plans. The flood wall between, there's flood wall B and C, they're in the upper, upstream area surrounding the apartment complex. If that will force the water over to Terrace Drive at 22nd. And then up in the lower reach of the lower downstream reach, there's a area where the channel gets really narrow and the flood, and was wondering if it would flood the industrial area downstream from inching the water too close together. And then we had some questions about water quality issues because Watson Park is a former landfill. So, and that's it.
Anything else? Anything else?
I just wanted to mention one of the things that several people have raised is if we have flood walls, we're gonna raise the water surface elevation a little bit. So what we're doing is we're working with hydraulics and hydrology, our group, to make sure that we're not raising that water surface elevation more than a certain tolerance, which is about 0.2. That's the only, basically, that's what we are allowed to raise, because otherwise we're going to be flooding other areas that were not flooded before. So we're actually looking at that as well, as part of this project.
Okay, my name is Judy, and we cover the Reach 7 East William Street to Highway 280. So some of the comments that we discussed about, or some of the points we discussed about, one of the solution that along the Williams Park was like a terrace garden with a beautiful vegetation, but Cindy's comment was about, well, who's going to maintain all that vegetation, So the existing sort of vegetation they have, a lot of the community members are taking care of it, and they want to make sure that maintenance responsibility is clearly laid out. And also the other alternative that you have presented as a solution in lieu of the sort of traditional farm idea, right, with the steps. They wanted to know more about sort of the design detail, because access is really critical to the resident. There's a steps are not too high, and all along that, I mean, where is going to be the access point? Is there going to be a ramp? You know, very family friendly kind of feature. They want to make sure that access and, you know, the family friendly features are considered when you're doing that alternative design. Okay, and I think the drainage that Keegan talked about, I think was mentioned, you know, he was saying that it's not only the, you know, creek overflowing, obviously some of the, you know, water came from the inadequate side, and it looks like the actual preventer, you know, that's something that, and Doris kind of clarified that, you know, we're working with the city on that solution. I mean, Kevin is you know, he loves our creek and involved in cleaning up the creek, and he noticed a lot of trash, really concerned about the water quality. So one of the city's idea is, like, when we're doing the homeless encampment cleanup and whatnot, can we do it in a more prioritizing manner where, you know, the areas where we had more recent flooding, those areas will get detention first. So, you know, instead of kind of, you know, the process, maybe we could take a look at and reduce the flood risk by using that kind of prioritization process. So that was one of the suggestions coming from Cindy, which I thought was really interesting. Cynthia also wanted to know, though, you know, along the 16th Street, it barely flooded, right? Shallow flooding on the street, but homes, they weren't really impacted. So she wants to know why that berm is still needed, or, you know, whatever that, you know, whether it be terrace or steps, why do we still need that? So if you could explain that one more time, Comrade, that'd be great.
So we have, it's not only the vegetated berm, but even a passive barrier, right? So what we want to do is, as I mentioned, we want to try to prevent the flooding of the street itself. Also, as you remember from 2017, water went into the street and then it went into the homes on the north side of William Street. I think I have, I don't have it, but anyways, yeah, William Street and then South 16th Street. So those people living on South 16th Street and William Street, they got flooded not only from behind, but also from the front. Water going into the William Street Park and flooding those homes. So we're trying to prevent water from going into the street, first of all, because it's a critical facility, and also from the street into the homes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though you guys, some of those houses on just across from William Street, the ones that are high up, those didn't get flooded. If you follow the way how the water flooded the streets on William Street and South 16th Street, it was from the street. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's from the east side, yeah.
Okay, let's hear from Table 6. I know they have a wealth of interest.
Yes. So we discussed Reach 7 from East Santa Clara Street to San Antonio Street, which is along the Royal Way. But we also had questions about the dam and upstream where we're trying to detain floods in Coyote Valley. So first question, why after so many years of planning upgrades for the dam did we just decide that we needed capacity to create downstream right now? And after so many years of overlooking deficiencies with the dam, should we have any confidence in the district's planning process and that it can fix the problem? So along the Royal Way, residents felt that flood walls and berms were not appropriate for this area. If the segment of the passive barrier were to fail, then the whole system would fail. Can we trust in the 100% track record of the passive flood barriers? And then upstream at Coyote Valley, why can't we use pumps to move water from the creek to the detention area or some kind of siphon? I think there were some doubts about the analysis that was done and how much attenuation it could truly provide. And wouldn't it be marginally cheaper just to raise the homes or acquire the properties altogether? And is this project completely funded and how?
Great. Thank you very much. So we're coming to the close of the meeting. Again, all of this information, the questions, staff will take the questions, go back, identify responses, post it on the technical concerns and questions, there'll be another round of alternatives. The input that you've provided, there were 2 other meetings, November 6th and November 7th. All of that information will inform another set of alternatives, and Valley Water will come back with those spring 2020. I know most of you are on the mailing list. If you are not, please leave your address and email so you receive the meeting notifications. In addition, we know that what you've experienced has been incredibly challenging. And again, as Director Keegan mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to come out and be a part of this meeting. It makes a difference. It's informing these alternatives, and actually it adds a lot more fuel when the district is working with other governmental agencies, that there's been so much public participation and so much investment in the process. So thank you very much for that. And I don't know if other staff members have any other closing comments, or Director Keegan?
I would really like to follow up with thanking everyone so much for coming here tonight. It's less than, it's 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving. I know you're all busy. You all have things that you need to do to get ready for the holidays, and this is taking time out of people's very busy lives. But your input is so important, and it also has helped me to realize how we might want to shape some of our future meetings to better anticipate some of the questions and issues you bring up. And I would like to encourage you, if you have suggestions for the next round of meetings, like in terms of format or how you like things presented, please contact our project staff, because they do want to hear from you. We want to continue to get better and to meet your needs. And again, thank you very much. Amber's, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, just to finalize, I have a list of addresses, places that I want to go visit. I visited about 7 properties. Look at your backyards, look at if a flood wall will be feasible, if you don't like a flood wall and we want to do something else. And I'm interested in going because from my map that I have and my ladder and my elevation, it's not clear how things happen. So in order for my project preferred alternative to get informed, I would like to go visit some of these properties. I've been trying to communicate with some of you, but it's kind of difficult to communicate with everyone. So since we have everyone here, if you guys are in there, come see me, and then you can give me your information. I can email you, and then we'll schedule a visit. And I will go with my staff, and we'll take measurements and see what we can do in your backyard or in your home. How can we protect you? So I just wanted to say that before you leave.